The work connection begins with the employment process. You have to go through an employment process. First of all, you have to gather in all your potential candidates that you want to interview for the job. Once you do that, then you go through at the actual selection. So one is gathering a pool and then taking that pool and then choosing from that pool. But each one's fraught with all kinds of problems. Is your pool adequate? Are you really looking at the market? Do you have specific regulations that regulate your market? Are you reaching out? Are you actually actively out there trying to recruit from a large, diverse number of sources in the process? So we talk about different things. Let's talk about that aspect of it. So on the evolution of the employment relationship, sourcing and managing the employee assets of the firm, it has to have some knowledge and care. Let me give you several examples that I have. When I have to go out and hire for a nursing faculty member, I have my typical group of 3 to 5 different places where I advertise. Normally it's general, but because I'm a public institution, I'm required by state law to advertise for all faculty and administrator positions in statewide publications. So I have my own group. But nursing is a very specific area. You have to know your material. So on top of that, I recruit in different nursing magazines for nurses. Sometimes they don't have any kind of any kind of experience that can classify as teaching, but they do have nursing experience, and so that could be my pool of applicants. Also, if I have an area where I want to make certain I have diversity, I might specifically advertise in employment magazines that focus in on Hispanic opportunities, African American opportunities, Black opportunities. I might actually go to some specific ethnic related employment areas to sit down there and to advertise for a specific area if I really need to focus in on that. So let's pay attention to where you're hiring. Sometimes I may have 7 different publications that have advertising in. Almost everything nowadays is online, so pay attention to that. Look at the knowledge and care where you're gathering in your people. If you really want to have diversity, that's a decision made by your organization, but also it should be within bounds as to who your geographic representation is as well as your customers. So pay attention to all the different aspects of it if you're not governed by law. Generally, you have leeway in making employment decisions, long as you don't do anything that could be construed as discriminatory. That's true whether you're public or private sector, so make certain that you know how your candidates are chosen. There's a couple things. First of all, you gather your pool. You also need to have some training on your committee as to what's appropriate and what isn't appropriate. There'll be some practices that you have. Generally, when you deal with any kind of business, especially your larger ones, you have different levels that you're going to have to deal with. You might have a broad overarching policy, and that policy will be general in terms, talk about where you should recruit. For faculty in my job, faculty, I have a specific policy that I have to go through a public hearing, have the board of trustees actually watch it, and then underneath that I have a procedure. So policy, procedure. The procedure gets down into the more granular items that's very specific about how you do this, how you do this, how you do this, how many people on the committee, what does the committee do, and so on. And then you have practice, your 3 P's, policy, procedure, and practice. You know, the practice, you're not going to go to the board of trustees and say, we want to make certain that we tape the questions to the table when the potential employee comes in, and that way we tape them to the table so they can't steal them on the way out the door. And we want to sit down and give them an opportunity to review the questions 15 minutes before the interview, and that way they're not scrambling, they can have an intelligent answer. Those aren't things you put into policy, a big giant overarching process, or even the procedure. They're practices. You have 3 different levels. Broad, super broad is policy, general detail is procedure, and the practice is how you do the actual work. So pay attention to what you're doing. Each one of them should all be as pristine as possible for anybody to point a finger at that you discriminated because of the following. Some of the practices Okay, when you sit and you have a search committee, now it's common in public sector that you have search committees that are large. I was on one committee where I was hired. I had 23 people on the committee. Oh my gosh, that was huge. Other times I've seen them as low as 3. It's pretty common in the private sector to have 1 to 3 people that are involved in the hiring process. It's also common to have about 2 different interviews. One, your very first one would be from people that might actually be performing the job, and the second one might be for the supervisor of that job. It just depends what your process is. But let's talk about the aspect of how to reduce any potential for discrimination. You need to have somebody that is not involved to make certain that the questions that are asked are uniform in process. Make certain that you limit them by having choices about status factor that really compromise bedrock values. Make certain that if it's at-will employment, it captures the actions of the policies that can override the aspect of it. Always keep in mind Title VII, age discrimination, Immigration Reform and Control Act, the Vocational Rehab Act, the ADA. You want to comply with all those. You want to sit down and make accommodations for anybody that you don't even know who, might have a disability. So have something right there on your job posting. If there's any needs that you have for us to make your process more comfortable, please let us know. Age discrimination, don't put things like recent college grad. Okay, you're automatically saying, because recent college grad really pertains generally, not all the time, but generally to younger people. All of a sudden now you're saying, I really want somebody young. And those old people, they're not part of my thing. I want to focus in on getting these young people in here. That's what I want. Well, if you get that problem, you need to sit down and go to a different country. Okay, we want to sit down there and focus in as to reducing discrimination or the right to be sued over discrimination, because that is a right that when you pass a law as broad-reaching as Age Discrimination and Employment Act, that is a law they can be sued over. So pay attention to what's going on. No matter how we talk about it, artificial intelligence can and will have an impact in the hiring process today, and from not just today, but probably forever. The employee, the prospective employee, has to get past the AI screening method. So when you have that, make certain your AI is not asking questions that are absolutely dumb. AI is capable of being dumb, and really, sometimes they do some ridiculous things. You will be responsible for your artificial intelligence benefits and mistakes that it might make. Make certain that you get on the system. My recommendation, if you have a new model, that you apply for a job, if you are the one in charge of employment law, and see what happens to the AI, see if it screens you out or does something outrageous that you need to sit down and correct. Be careful about what you're saying. One of the best things is word-of-mouth recruiting. There's an example that you can always look at as to, let's go recruit. I want to have recent college grads. Ding, 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 ding. Age discrimination. I want to go to the college area that's regional that I graduated from. Well, you might have a religious college. You might have basically a traditional black college. You exclude them, all of a sudden now you have a religious discrimination complaint and a racial discrimination complaint. If you're going to recruit locally, then do so in a geographic area rather than sit down and focus on this is mine over here and exclude other ones where you can get sued over. Plan on being successful. Plan on not having a challenge. The worst thing that'll happen, you might get more people involved and maybe find that gem at a place you didn't expect that you want to hire. Promoting from within, sometimes it depends what you want to have. If you promote from within, there should be some type of compelling employment reason, such as maybe reducing the workforce, so you don't want to expand your workforce. Or it could be another thing that you have a training program that you have already pre-approved and you're training somebody to get promoted from within. Sometimes I promote from within or advertise within the organization and outside at the same time. It depends what you're doing. Sometimes you actually have a regular pool of applicants that you might have and say, we're going to recruit for this type of a position in case we need it right away. And we do that on a regular basis because of the fact that sometimes we need an employee of this particular ilk and everything. So say, okay, there's one over there. There's an adjunct faculty member for business. Yes. Okay, how many we got in that pool? Oh, we got 7. Let's interview all 7. That's what that is for. Sometimes you'll have that. Sometimes people will walk in and provide an unsolicited resume. Hang on to it. That could be the gem you're looking for someday. You want to sit down and make certain that you have a neutral solicitation. Take the gender-specific titles out. Take things that are demeaning in titles, things that you wouldn't have out there. So make certain that you're consistent on there. And try your best to make certain that bias isn't out there so you don't hire a bunch of nuts, so to speak. Okay, so by the time you're all done, make certain some of the prohibited cues, people with disabilities, don't box them out. People with certain health risks, workers' comp history, be cautious as to what you're looking for. Make certain is germane. In other words, apply specifically to the job. HR, in my opinion, or whoever's in charge of your employment law, they should be the ones to review all questions. All questions. Now, the word all means all-inclusive. Your committee should not be asking questions that were not pre-approved. Don't ask the question if you were going to lead a parade to celebrate somebody's birthday in the workplace, what would be your main theme? If you could be an animal, what kind of an animal would you be? Human? Okay, sometimes people come up with questions and they think they're intelligent and they frankly aren't. And the problem is they're kind of cutesy, except for the fact they sure are not cutesy when you're sitting in front of a jury of 10 people over there saying, oh wow, that was really a smart thing. You didn't like him because he wanted to be a monkey. Okay, what's your problem? Tell me how being a monkey would sit there and damage this job over here. I'm not exaggerating. These are actual questions that people ask sometimes. I do not know what happened, that they were injured somewhere and came up with that type of thing. It just, from my perspective, it doesn't belong in the area of employment. So that being said, monitor the questions. You need to know if you're in charge of employment law. Be careful about discrimination. Be careful to relevance. Make certain it's highly focused. Care of the questions. Watch out for simple things like maiden name. No, any other name is appropriate. Just make certain that you are neutral and nobody can point a finger, because you too could be sitting in front of a jury someday because you had a poor gathering process and a selection process out there as well. Recognize unconscious bias. You know, I hear a lot of people, they point their fingers at one race is responsible for this. Know this. Every single human being has a tendency to hire people like themselves. A lot of times it's like themselves in skin tone or gender or whatever, but sometimes I've seen people hire people. I had one person, I had a college president who was a bully. He tended to hire all bullies. It was miserable. We had to put up with that whole group for years afterwards, even after he left. So with that, be careful about hiring yourself. Recognize that every human being on planet Earth has a tendency to hire somebody like themselves. Try to put that out the door. I always make certain committees are trained to keep their mind open, not the 2.5 to 7 seconds in the hiring process, but to try to keep their minds open for 30 minutes. That is harder to do, and most of us can't do it unless we're coached and trained to do that. Interviews. Make certain there's training. Avoid ridiculous comments. I had a faculty member one time on the committee. He decided to read the paper during interviews. I kicked him off the committee, and he was offended and didn't understand why. Okay, so sometimes you have these people asking questions, and they pursue things afterwards, and they shouldn't be doing it. Make certain committees are trained with expectations. Make certain the first time around if somebody's on a committee that you have somebody working with them to coach them in the process. Look for characteristics. Train the interviewers for sensitivity. Train them to look for outcomes as to what's out there. Reference checks, always do them. One time I came across somebody, and in my line of work, I've had to sit down and check for sexual harassment and pedophilia. I had somebody that was out there, and I found out that Best Buy confiscated a computer he took in, and they confiscated the computer because he had child porn on it. We'd actually offered him the job pending the outcome of the reference background. We had to withdraw it, and he had to go back to his other job at another university, believe it or not. They didn't check that. Check the backgrounds, look for references, go past the 3 people you always ask for. Employment law, it begins at hiring. The first step, gather candidate pool, monitor appropriate pool gathering, monitor the questions, and train your committee. Take care.